Hi, and welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. My name's Martin, and this is Cut Loose, where we hope to tell tales of life and adventures after work. And not just after 5 PM, but after work. This vlog is a bit of an insight, I suppose, into what led me to making the rather major decision to step back from a career that's really become a big part of me and what much of my life has been about. I suppose it all started to gain momentum just over a year ago. But in fact, the seed started to germinate quite a while ago, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I suppose things started to surface during the COVID pandemic, and let's face it, we all had lots of disruption in our lives. But things for me were already becoming sort of mentally challenging at work. At that time, I'd been working at Wick and Fen for over 25 years, but the passion that I'd always felt for my job was starting to diminish. Not diminish in terms of the passion that I had for wildlife, or the passion that I had for seeing the nature reserve grow and thrive, nor indeed for my passion for nature conservation and the general state of the planet. I suppose my loss of enthusiasm was for actually going to work, for working within the ever-changing system, the everyday things, that run-of-the-mill things that make the world tick, but which for me was I was simply falling out of love with it all. Of course, I didn't acknowledge any of this to myself. Well, we never do we? Even through the pandemic, with things were changing almost on a daily basis, causing all sorts of stress in trying to keep up, I didn't accept that my time at Wick and Fen might just be drawing to a close. No, the event that brought it all into sharp focus for me was that I suffered a heart attack in May of 2021. In fact, it now transpires that I suffered two events within a couple of days of each other. But I had no idea of that at the time. I just thought I was feeling a little bit run down, a little bit under the weather. I won't bore you with the details of that. Suffice to say that the staff at Papworth were amazing. Anyway, following hospitalisation and a reasonable recovery period, things on the surface, regarding my health at least, all looked to be a bit honky-dory. However, it wasn't all it seemed to be. I'm not sure what I expected, having had a heart attack, but my heart now only operates at 2/3 capacity and isn't going to improve. I'm assured that if I can keep myself fit, or at least keep my fitness levels up, there's no reason why I can't lead a great life well into the future. The main problem is that I can feel the difference. I feel the fatigue in the afternoons. I can feel the tired muscles after I've been cycling for any distance, which once upon a time, would have been quite straightforward and easy. I feel some degrees of angst when it comes to events like this, and it's sometimes you just don't know quite what it's all about. And so during the recovery period, in July, August of 2021, the penny started to drop, and I began to accept that whilst I love the thought of working at Wick and Fen, and I love what it stands for, maybe it was time to think about a change. The big question was, can I afford to retire? The next question, close on the heels, what on earth am I going to do with my time? So taking the first point, first, I had a conversation with an old schoolmate, Neil. We chatted about my recovery, and I mentioned that I was starting to wonder whether or not life on the fens was still as big for me as it once had been. He mentioned retirements, and I sort of repeated the old mantra that I didn't have enough financial backing to be able to retire, having only a couple of rudimentary pensions, in addition to the state pension, of course. What's more, I had a sizable mortgage, my lovely cottage in the village, and a cottage that I absolutely adore. His response to that was, go and speak to somebody and find out about it, get a financial advisor's perspective on things. So with little hope or expectation of anything changing, or that I was going to be able to lead a comfortable life in retirement in the near future, I arranged a meeting in sort of late July, early August of 21. Prior to the meeting, I still felt that it would be, I'd have to stay at work for at least another 4 years, and I had sort of 2025 as a retirement year. but I duly compiled all of the information on my finances, the expenditure, pensions, and I also made some notes about the sort of thing that I hoped my future might look like, and I set off for the meeting. Bearing in mind that these things are a little bit tricky, they're not allowed to give you, because of the sort of regulations and things, they're not allowed to give you direct financial advice until all the hoops have been jumped through. But he did point out that from his perspective, if I didn't have a mortgage, the sort of figures that I'd put in front of him in terms of my financial situation, I could quite happily retire, or comfortably retire, on what was laying there on the table. And I still had my two sort of mediocre pensions sitting there in the wings for, well, whatever, might be needed for. So, eureka! It was a light bulb moment. The frustrating thing for me is, why on earth hadn't I noticed that myself? That simple fact myself. So then, once I'd woken up and smelled the dry roasted beans, fair trade of course, I started to think along much different lines to, well, pretty much the previous 25 years. Obviously, if I didn't want a mortgage, I'd need to pass the cottage on to some other lucky party. This would free me up to move close to the family. I'd suffered rather a lot during the isolation of the pandemic, as most of us had, and I really missed them, and the thought of moving closer to them was very exciting. Moving would also remove a big challenge that I foresaw on the horizon. I love the place that I work, and living in the same community I'd always seen as a big advantage. However, living there and not working there might pose challenges, sort of like being on the outside of work and not in the thick of things, but still sort of in the same vicinity. Would I start to regret my decision? Not being around would take that out of the equation completely. The next thing was to find out the value of the cottage, if it were to go on the market. I had a rough estimate at the time of my last sort of mortgage renewal, but that was a little while ago now, so I wasn't really sure what it was worth. I have a friend of mine that also happens to be an estate agent. I don't hold that against him. He's actually quite a nice bloke. So I asked Greg if he'd come over and cast his professional eye over the place and give me an idea of what it might be worth if we put it on the market. He came over, had a look round, and then he asked me if I had any ideas about the cottage value. I said that I didn't. All I had was the valuation at the last mortgage renewal, and so I gave him that figure. He then told me what he thought it was worth if it went on the market, and I have to say those figures were not quite poles apart, but were vastly different in my favour. So armed with this newly discovered information, it appeared that retirement was now becoming a distinct possibility. The next step was to look at property prices closer to where the family were. Could mortgage free be on the cards as well? A quick scan around Rightmove online brought some encouraging information. Just a couple of days creating a suitable search, which was within 30 minutes of the family, which put in the criteria of the sort of place I was looking for. Within a couple of days brought forward 6 potential properties, all fitting my criteria and all within that search range. This was really starting to look very promising. I think the phrase is game on. So that took care of a lot of the financial and practical aspects. But what about the emotional aspects? What about leaving a career, vocation really, that I've loved for nearly 40 years? What about giving up the cottage that I've dragged from a near ruin and turned it into a lovely cosy home? These could be difficult decisions to make, and I didn't want to act rashly. I needed to evaluate the whole thing a lot more rationally. So having pretty much come to terms with the fact that I was struggling, and that struggle at Wickenfen was something that I didn't want to continue. And that, you know, it probably was time to pass over to a new regime. Had I achieved enough? Had I done enough to satisfy what I set out to achieve at the very start? You know, it sounds a little bit conceited, but I had to work these things out in my head. Equally, how would I feel about someone else moving into my lovely home, making all sorts of changes, making wholesale alterations and altering things that had taken so much effort and so much planning to do? To get over all of these, or to come to terms with all of these, I gave myself the luxury of time, plenty of time. It would allow me to get things sorted out in my head, but these things were going to be difficult to reconcile, and I needed to give myself lots of time to do it. The reality, though, was quite a lot easier than I expected. Yes, I would find leaving the fen a wrench, but I was already enjoying the challenge less and less. I'd struggled to deal with the change in workload prior to May 21, and then I had a heart attack. I'd already recognised the benefits of moving close to the family and having more time to do the things that I wanted to do. Quid pro quo. I think the phrase is, it was a bit of a no-brainer. Less stress, less hassle, and more relaxation time for me. The cottage was really quite similar. Yes, I would find handing over to someone else very hard, but although me and the cottage had been great friends during the renovations, sounds a bit daft, but that's how I saw it. Maybe it was time for somebody else to have a go, to make their mark on the cottage. I'd put a lot of myself into the cottage, and its final gift to me was allowing me to become financially independent. And that's not to be sniffed at. The cottage would in effect become my cash cow. Wow, that's it then. I guess I'm going to retire. It's all starting to get a little bit real now. But when? Well, this all took place in July and August of 2021. And I sat on the decision for about a month to let it settle in and for me to get used to the idea. But when would it be? Now, the 3rd of July would be the 27th anniversary of me starting at Wickenfen. 12th of July happens to be my birthday. I decided on the 12th of July, and I don't really know why, other than the 3rd of July happens to be on a Sunday, and it's just seemed a bit daft to have the last day at work on a day when you're not at work. We all end in a bit of a damp squib, really. So I've been involved in these decisions right from the start, so already knew all about it. I informed the family in September, mid-September, and a week later I told my boss and the guys at work. I decided to actually hold off formally handing in my notice until January, but pretty much that was it. Except, what was I going to do about my pensions? How was I going to manage that? The house needs finishing off. It needs those finishing touches to it. I've got a load of clutter to clear away, the stuff that I'd hoarded during the renovation. And what about my future? What does that look like? Talk about job half done. All of these latter decisions make that sort of retirement decision seems like child's play. So next then, or is it first, or no, it can't be first. I'm too far down the road for that. Anyway, how was I going to manage my pension funds? Now this got me a little bit freaked out. I'd made some inquiries to find out what financial advisors cost, and quite frankly, that scared the pants off me. I couldn't afford this. I really couldn't afford this. And I can hear everybody screaming, you know, oh, here he goes, same old mantra. But I did a lot of investigating online. But the more I looked into it and the more I tried to work things out for myself, the more impossible it seemed to become. Here I was leaving work to remove all sorts of stress, and then getting stressed out about my pensions. It didn't really, you know, make sense. Particularly when all the advice was to get a financial advisor to take care of things. So on that basis, I had conversations with 4 advisors to try and evaluate the situation. I also had a chat with a PensionWise advisor online, and that was really helpful, really useful service. But all of this sort of drew me to the decision to enlist the services of a financial advisor to help me manage this situation. And so I have a Steve. In the meantime, Eve and I had batted around a number of scenarios about how we wanted to spend our time after work. We're both active people, enjoy the excitement and curiosity that travel brings. My health and the climate crisis has probably put paid to any thoughts of ours of gallivanting across the globe. On the one hand, it'd be a little reckless, and on the other hand, having spent much of my working life trying to reduce the human impact on the planet, it seems a little bit hypocritical then go off long distance travelling, particularly now we understand the implications of all of that. So in order to satisfy our travel bug, we've ended up with what we both think is a really great plan. And the details of that, or the bones of that plan, are in the channel intro vlog, the link of which is below. So, in respect of a property or a replacement for the cottage, I mentioned that I had a set of criteria, and part of that was to be quite close to the family, and that's still the case. But at least in the early stages, or in the near future, I won't be living in that property. I'm getting it primarily to allow me to stay on the property ladder. It would be a bit foolish not to be. Eve and I want to spend a lot more time together, and because we won't be working, well, it'll allow us more time to go and see the family anyway. And a property close to them will allow us to use it as a base when we go and visit. But in the meantime, I want to set it up as a holiday let. I don't need it to make lots of extra money. It only needs to wipe its face, so that it doesn't put an extra financial burden on us. And I intend or hope to get an agent to manage it. That will help take some of the stress out of it all. And then it'll be there in the future as and when required. In the meantime, it can help us stay solvent and earn its keep, so to speak. Let me just put you down here. So then, that's the house. Where are we going to live? Well, we've decided that we want to spend our life on a boat. We both like an outdoor life. We both like discovering new things. A boat seems like the logical place where we can fulfill all of these things and still leave a relatively small footprint as possible. There are over 2,000 miles of connected waterway in the UK, and we want to see as much of it as we possibly can. How far we get is anybody's guess. As yet, we don't know where the boat is, so we don't have any idea where our starting point will be. Therefore, we don't know where we'll go. But we don't intend to have a permanent or home mooring. We want to be what is referred to as continual cruisers, moving when we want to or when we have to, hanging around for as long as we're able to, when it suits us, of course. One of the slight conundrums, I suppose, is regarding vehicles. Currently, between us, we have 3 cars. Bit excessive, I grant you. But we do live 4 hours apart these days. Eve has a hybrid. I have a daily car, and I also have a classic car, which I use for sort of high days and holidays. I intend to keep the NG, the classic car, for now. It took me 2 years to restore, and it seems a little daft to get rid of it right at the point when I'm likely to be in a better position to use it more often. My other car is very economical and low emissions, but it's going to be sitting idle on a drive somewhere for months, who knows how long, if we're going to be on a boat. So it makes sense for me to pass on the modern car and keep the classic. This then got me thinking about a few things, and a van sort of popped into the equation. I'm always in need of a project. I know I need something to keep me engaged and occupied. Now obviously the boat will fulfill that to a large degree, but living and being part of the same project is sometimes tough, and I know this from personal experience with the cottage, with the house. I really need a project that I can put down and walk away from periodically. A project that doesn't come with time schedules. So this project will be a rolling camper conversion. There'll be several advantages to this. It'll give even me the chance to hop off the waterways when we need a change. It'll be available to the family to use, so they can either come down to us for the boat at weekends, or they can pop into their hills for a few days away on their own. The plan is in its infancy, but it is gathering traction and getting very exciting. So that brings me up to date. Eve has a few details to iron out. She's a little younger than I am, and she has a few additional factors to take into account. She has a horse. Now, I did suggest that the horse could be fantastic for pulling the boat. Didn't go down very well. However, she has got the bug, and she wants to find a way that she can make a break from her job. This job is also starting to lose its gloss. So then, retirement for me is now mere days away, and everything is in place for those next steps to begin. I've handed over the reins to my successor at work. The rest of the team and the new guy are bonding well, and things are looking really positive, which is brilliant. And that's helped me to relax and step back from things. All this has made things a little bit weird though. I'm no longer in the thick of it at work. I'm included in conversations, but I suspect that's sort of out of a sense of courtesy to me rather than people requiring my input. But that's great. It means things are moving on. I've been relaxed at work for the first time in a long time. I don't have any deadlines looming. I can get out and enjoy the nature reserve, something that really hasn't happened for, well, I don't know how long that's been. I'm winding down and getting ready for a complete change in life, and it feels good. I think back to the past 12 months or so and think of the decisions and the decision processes that I've been through, and it's been quite logical and straightforward. When you look at things in the cold light and you take the emotion out of it, things fall into place quite nicely. Well, it kind of did for me. So on that note, I'll sign off for now. There should be more coming along soon. Next step, well, get retired, of course. But then start to pack up the house. Things aren't completed yet and there's still paperwork to do. But I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to pack up the house, get everything ready to go into storage. Then I'm going down to stay with Eve for a while until things start to move forward again. So take care, everybody. And if you found this interesting, and you already aren't, please subscribe and ding the bell if you want to get notifications, and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. So take care, everybody. Cheers.